She screamed at his pregnant wife, tore up their garden, and thought she was untouchable, until he stepped out in uniform. This isn't just any neighborhood drama, this is the moment HOA Karen picked the wrong guy to mess with. Stay locked in, because what happens next? You'll want to see it all the way through. Before we jump in, if you love real-life justice stories where bad behavior gets exposed and put in its place, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us in the comments, what's the craziest thing your HOA has ever done? Back away from my wife. Right now. The voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that freezes a person in place, like they just stepped onto thin ice. The man standing in front of the screaming woman wasn't raising his voice or clenching his fists. He didn't have to. His presence alone carried weight, the weight of a man trained to handle pressure, to make split-second decisions in chaos. The woman, HOA Karen, as the neighborhood quietly called her, didn't get it. Not yet. She had one hand planted on her hip, the other pointing like a dagger toward the pregnant woman beside the mailbox. The sun glinted off the sheriff's badge now hanging from the man's belt. That was the moment she realized. The man she had been harassing, filing complaints against, and shouting at in front of the whole cul-de-sac, he wasn't just some homeowner. He was a cop. And he wasn't just any cop. He was the wrong guy to mess with. And she had just gone after his pregnant wife. Before she could pull her hand back, he stepped between them. His eyes locked onto hers. This is your last warning. But she didn't listen. And that's when everything spun out of control. For months earlier, everything had been quiet. Peaceful. Elijah and his wife, Nicole, had just moved into Cedar Pines, a gated community in northern Georgia, about 20 minutes from his station. Elijah had been a decorated officer for over a decade, known for defusing situations with words before weapons. He wasn't the loudest man in the room, he was the one people listened to when it mattered most. Nicole was 6 months pregnant when they moved in. First baby. They were excited, nervous, and hopeful. Nicole had always dreamed of having a big front porch and a little garden, and this house had both. It was a fresh start for a growing family. The day after they moved in, neighbors came by with pies and plastic smile introductions. Most seemed kind enough. Quiet families. Retired couples. A few young professionals. It wasn't a lively street, but it was clean and safe. Except for one woman. Her real name was Judith, but everyone called her Karen, though never to her face. She was the HOA secretary and treated that title like it gave her FBI clearance. She monitored trash can placement like national security depended on it. She snapped photos of parked cars at 12:01 a.m. and filed formal warnings like clockwork. Karen lived 3 houses down with her 2 perfectly groomed poodles and an American flag that she replaced every 3 months. She didn't smile. She inspected. And from day one, she had a problem with Nicole. Maybe it was the fact Nicole was always barefoot in the front yard, humming as she watered the marigolds. Or maybe it was the porch swing Elijah installed that didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. Whatever it was, the petty notes began to pile up. First, it was about the flower pots, unapproved garden decor. Then it was the mailbox, a half-inch taller than HOA regulation. Elijah thought about pushing back, but Nicole insisted they let it go. "I want peace, not war," she said. Let her play queen of the sidewalk. So they swallowed it. Until Karen started getting bolder. One Tuesday afternoon, Nicole walked down the street to get the mail. It was a warm, sticky Georgia day. She was 8 months pregnant now, walking slower, carrying more weight than her small frame was used to. As she bent to open the mailbox, she heard it. "You're not allowed to pick up mail without shoes on. It's unsanitary." Nicole looked up, confused. Karen was standing by her front steps, arms crossed. Nicole blinked. "I'm just getting the mail." Karen marched down the sidewalk. "You're on common property now. This isn't your personal jungle. There are rules." Nicole backed away, one hand instinctively resting on her belly. I'm asking you to step away from the curb. You're setting a poor example for the neighborhood. What if children see you out here like this? Nicole frowned. I am a child's mother. Or will be soon. Karen raised her voice. Not with that attitude, you won't. The words landed like a slap. Nicole turned and walked back to the house, blinking hard. She didn't want Elijah to know. He'd just gotten off a night shift, and she wanted him to rest. But the stress bubbled beneath her skin like a fever. She didn't say anything, not until the next day, when she found her flowers ripped out of their planters. Literally pulled from the soil. She called Elijah in tears. My garden, it's all gone. He came home early and walked the yard in silence. He saw the security camera mounted under the porch, pulled up the footage, and watched. It was Karen. She was in gloves. She took every marigold and every daisy, stuffed them into a trash bag, and left. Nicole looked at Elijah, her eyes wide and wet. Please, don't do anything. Just let it go. But Elijah's jaw was tight. That night, he didn't sleep. The next morning, HOA citations started showing up daily. One said they couldn't hang baby onesies on the porch rail while painting the nursery, visual clutter. Another claimed their car was too close to the sidewalk. Then a formal warning arrived saying Nicole had engaged in hostile behavior toward a board member. Elijah was stunned. The day he decided to confront Karen, respectfully, he brought his badge and body cam. He wanted to keep everything clean. Civil, Nicole begged him not to, but Elijah had had enough. He walked to Karen's porch, waited until she answered, and said, "Ma'am, I'd like to have a calm discussion about the recent events on our property." Karen didn't let him finish. Are you threatening me, officer? She hissed, her voice low. Elijah blinked. What? No. She stepped out and pulled her phone up like a sword. Back away from my property or I'm calling your station. You want to threaten the HOA secretary? Let's see what Internal Affairs thinks. Elijah stayed quiet. Then turned around and walked away. But that night, his tires were slashed. And he still said nothing. Until today. Until he found his wife crying on the curb with Karen screaming at her in public. I said back away. Karen turned. Saw the badge. The gun. The cop. The husband. Nicole stood behind him, shaking, one hand over her belly, the other covering her mouth. Elijah stepped forward. Karen stepped back. But not before making a mistake that would flip the entire neighborhood upside down. She reached for Nicole. And that's when. She reached for Nicole's arm, maybe to shove her, maybe to yank her back toward the sidewalk. It was a blur. But what happened next wasn't. Elijah's hand moved fast. Not in anger, not recklessly, but with the swift, practiced motion of someone who had been trained for moments just like this. His fingers closed around Karen's wrist before she made contact. Firm. Not forceful. Just enough to stop her mid-motion. Karen gasped and stumbled back. You assaulted me, she shrieked. A few neighbors peeked through blinds. One porch camera blinked red in the corner of a roofline. I didn't touch you, Elijah said, his voice level. But you tried to touch my wife. Nicole was holding onto the porch railing now, clearly shaken. The stress wasn't good for her, not this late in the pregnancy. Her breathing was off. Shallow. Elijah turned to her. Go inside, sweetheart. Now. Nicole nodded and disappeared behind the front door. Karen pointed a trembling finger. You're going to regret this. You just laid hands on a member of the HOA board. That's assault on a civilian official. Elijah raised an eyebrow. Karen, you need to stop. I have body cam footage. Every second of this. You've crossed the line. You think your badge gives you power here? She snapped. You think you can walk around like some sheriff of the cul-de-sac? Let me tell you something, This community doesn't belong to you. I make the rules. Not you. Not your pregnant little. That's when the screen door swung open again. It wasn't Nicole. It was Elijah's younger brother, Chris. Chris was staying with them temporarily, helping out while Elijah picked up overtime shifts. He wasn't a cop, but he was built like one, broad shoulders, strong presence, and protective to a fault when it came to Nicole. He walked down the porch steps slowly, eyes fixed on Karen. "Ma'am, I think you should go back to your house. You're not welcome here." Karen's face turned beet red. She was breathing hard now, as if she were the one under attack. "I'm calling the HOA president," she muttered. "And the county. And your precinct. You'll be out of this neighborhood by Friday." Then she turned on her heel and stormed down the street, nearly tripping over her poodle leash on the way. Elijah didn't say a word. He walked to his cruiser, pulled out the cam footage on his laptop, and saved every second of the incident to 2 drives, one for himself and one for Nicole's OBGYN, just in case the stress caused any complications. Inside the house, Nicole had slumped onto the couch, her hands over her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to make things worse." "You didn't," Elijah said. "She did." Later that evening, the doorbell rang. Not once. Not twice. 6 times. Rapid, like a fist pounding the button. Chris opened it, then froze. It was 2 HOA board members, Susan and Greg. Both are holding clipboards. "We need to speak with Officer Daniels," Greg said stiffly. Elijah stepped into the doorway, arms crossed. Susan gave a tight smile. "We've had several complaints. Some are quite serious. About your conduct this afternoon." "Let me guess," Elijah said. "From Karen." "She's our secretary," Greg said. "And her concerns carry weight. She says you threatened her. Physically restrained her. Did she also say she tried to grab my wife?" They exchanged glances. Elijah stepped back. "You want to file something? Go ahead. But you'll be doing it with a copy of this." He held up a USB stick. "Every minute. Clear footage. Unedited." Susan's face changed. We didn't know there was footage." "There always is," Elijah said. Greg shifted uncomfortably. "Still, we do need to discuss the growing tension between your family and the HOA." Chris couldn't help himself. "The only growing tension is coming from Karen and her war on flower pots and porch swings." Susan coughed. "We're not here to take sides. Just try to keep things peaceful, okay? This is a quiet community." "Then tell your secretary to act like it," Elijah said and closed the door. That night, Nicole couldn't sleep. Every time she shut her eyes, she saw Karen's face. She dreamed of being dragged off the sidewalk. Of her baby crying before it was even born. Elijah stayed awake beside her, hand resting gently on her belly. He didn't say anything, but something had shifted in him. There was a line, and Karen had crossed it. The next morning, a letter arrived in their mailbox. No stamp. No name. Just one sentence typed in bold. "You're not safe here." Nicole dropped it when she read it. Elijah scanned it, then went straight into action. He filed a report, printed security camera stills, installed 2 more motion sensors near the driveway, and looped in his precinct quietly. But things only got worse. 2 days later, Nicole's car tires were slashed. Again. This time in broad daylight. They filed another report. The HOA stayed silent. Chris knocked on neighbors' doors, trying to find someone who might have seen something. Most said no. A few looked away too quickly. And one, an older man named Reggie from 2 houses down, pulled him aside. "You all need to be careful," Reggie whispered. "This place isn't what it looks like." Chris frowned. "What do you mean?" Reggie leaned in. Karen's been running this HOA like it's her personal kingdom. But she's got dirt on people. Secrets. She's not just annoying, she's dangerous. Chris narrowed his eyes. Then why won't anyone speak up? Reggie looked toward his front door nervously. Because we've seen what happens when you do. Chris went back home with a sick feeling in his gut. That evening, Elijah got a phone call. It wasn't from Karen. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from his boss at the precinct. Elijah, the voice said carefully, we received an official complaint from your HOA. They're accusing you of threatening a civilian. There's going to be an internal review. Elijah sat down slowly. You're kidding. I'm not. Look, I know you. But protocol's protocol. You'll be on desk duty until this is resolved. Nicole walked into the room just in time to see Elijah hang up the phone and drop his head into his hands. What happened? She asked. They're coming for my job, he said quietly. And just when they thought it couldn't get worse. Nicole cried out from the kitchen. Chris rushed in first. The back window was shattered. Glass all over the baby's play mat. And on the countertop. A brick. Taped to it was a note. Leave now. Or we'll finish what we started. Elijah picked up the brick with gloved hands, his face unreadable, though the vein twitching in his temple said everything. He scanned the shattered window, then stepped outside to check the backyard. Chris followed closely, phone in hand, already dialing 911. Nicole stood frozen in the kitchen, one hand gripping her stomach, the other trembling against the wall. The baby hadn't moved in a few minutes. Her mind raced. Was the stress doing something to the baby? Was it her fault for not telling Elijah sooner about Karen's harassment? She felt the world tilting beneath her feet. By the time the police arrived, Nicole was lying on the couch with her legs elevated and cold compresses on her forehead. The paramedics checked her vitals and confirmed the baby's heartbeat was strong, but they warned Elijah, any more stress like this could trigger early labor. Outside, a young officer surveyed the backyard, shaking his head. There's no camera back here? Elijah nodded grimly. Not yet. I've got motion lights, but nothing is aimed at the rear corner. I thought the fence was enough. The officer scribbled in his notebook. We'll dust the brick for prints, but if they wore gloves. They did, Elijah said. They always do. That night, no one slept. Chris stayed up patrolling the perimeter, and Elijah sat at the kitchen table reviewing footage and notes, pausing only to check on Nicole every hour. He felt helpless. This wasn't just about harassment anymore, it was targeted, malicious, and dangerous. And yet, without a clear suspect or visible proof, his hands were tied both as a cop and a husband. The next morning, they woke to find spray paint scrawled across their garage door. Get out. Red. Thick. Dripping. Elijah stood in the driveway, fists clenched, while Nicole wept silently on the porch swing, the same swing Karen once called an eyesore. Chris grabbed a hose and tried to wash it off, but it only smeared. This time, Elijah didn't call the precinct. He called Reggie. Whatever you know, now's the time, Elijah said, pacing under the morning sun. I'm not just dealing with some cranky old woman anymore. My family is in danger. Reggie hesitated. He looked over his shoulder, then stepped closer. There's a group, he whispered. Karen, a few of the board members, and some other folks. They don't just write citations. They target anyone who doesn't fit their mold. Young families. Mixed couples. Renters. Newcomers who don't respect the aesthetic, whatever that means. It's not just petty. It's strategic. Elijah's voice dropped. And the cops don't do anything? Most folks don't file police reports. They move out instead. Or sell at a loss. It's happened before. Chris's jaw tightened. You're saying she's running a scare campaign? Worse, Reggie said. She's got people convinced she is the law around here. Elijah didn't say anything for a long time. Then he nodded. All right. I'm done waiting. That evening, he called in a favor from an old friend, Darren Hughes, an IT specialist and ex-officer who now ran private surveillance operations. By midnight, Darren had rigged up 4 microcameras around the property, all invisible to the naked eye. He also installed motion-triggered alerts that would ping Elijah's phone immediately. If anyone so much as breathes near your fence line, Darren said, you'll know. Nicole felt a little safer knowing someone was finally fighting back. But the neighborhood didn't stay quiet for long. The next day, the HOA called a mandatory emergency meeting. Location: the clubhouse. Elijah didn't want Nicole to attend, but she insisted. I want them to see my face. I want them to know I'm not afraid. The room was packed. Dozens of residents sat in plastic chairs, fanning themselves with copies of the HOA charter. At the front stood Karen, clipboard in hand, smile thin as a paper cut. We're here to discuss repeated violations from residents who continue to disrupt our community standards, she began, her eyes grazing over Elijah and Nicole like knives. Whispers filled the room. Some sympathetic. Some do not. Karen cleared her throat. We've received multiple complaints of hostility, disorderly conduct, and unneighborly behavior. Our goal is not to ostracize anyone. Elijah stood. Karen froze. I'd like to speak, he said. You're not on the agenda, she snapped. I am now. The room went quiet. Karen opened her mouth, but Elijah raised a flash drive. This contains body cam footage from last week. Of you verbally harassing my pregnant wife. Of you trespassing and destroying property. I've submitted copies to the police, my department, and a private lawyer. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Elijah stepped forward, his voice even. Let me be clear. We moved here to raise a family. We came in peace. You answered with threats, damage, and fear. That ends now. Karen scoffed, trying to regain her footing. You think you can scare me with your little gadgets and stories? No, Elijah said. But facts speak louder than lies. And people are watching now. He turned to the crowd. If any of you have been mistreated, intimidated, or silenced by this board, now's your chance to speak. There was a pause. Then Reggie stood. Followed by a woman in the back, a nurse named Melissa who said Karen once threatened to fine her for parking in her own driveway. Another man, Jeremy, described how his lease renewal mysteriously fell through after he complained about the HOA fees. Voices rose. Truths surfaced. Karen tried to gavel the meeting shut, but the gavel was gone. Someone had taken it. She turned beet red. I will not be ambushed in my own community, she shouted. This is a smear campaign. Elijah didn't flinch. No. It's called accountability. On the drive home, Nicole finally smiled. Not a big smile, but the first real one in weeks. Elijah reached over and squeezed her hand. We're not done yet, he said. But we're getting close. The air smelled like rain. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Chris stepped in first and immediately froze. Elijah. The furniture was overturned. Papers scattered. The TV cracked. Curtains torn. And spray-painted across the nursery wall, in giant black letters. You were warned. Nicole gasped. Her knees buckled. And from inside the crib, something buzzed. A phone. Someone had left a burner phone with a single text message on the screen. Next time, we won't miss. Elijah didn't say a word as he walked into the nursery. His boots crunched over broken glass and crushed picture frames. Nicole stood at the doorway, hand covering her mouth, eyes locked on the black letters smeared across the pale blue wall, the same wall she'd painted herself just 3 weeks ago, humming to the baby while Elijah held the ladder steady. Chris picked up the phone from the crib with the edge of his shirt and handed it over. Elijah stared at the message on the screen, jaw tight. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the pure weight of what this meant. This was no longer intimidation. It was escalation. Nicole collapsed into the hallway chair, shaking. What do they mean, next time? Elijah kneeled in front of her. It means they've gone too far. And they're not hiding anymore. The police came within minutes. This time, they brought more than one patrol car. Darren came too, after Elijah sent him an emergency text. He reviewed the footage from the outdoor cameras. We've got two masked figures entering from the rear fence, Darren said. They knew exactly where the cameras weren't. But they didn't see the new one in the rain gutter. He paused. We got their truck. Plate and all. Elijah stood slowly, shoulders squared. Time to press charges. But when the officers ran the plate, things got complicated. It's a stolen vehicle, the officer reported. Out of Alabama. Probably ditched by now. Nicole stared at the ground. So we're back to square one? Not quite, Darren said. There's more than one way to skin a rat. He spent the next few hours pulling metadata, scraping timestamps, and matching it against neighborhood patterns. That night, Elijah filed for a restraining order against Karen and two others on the HOA board. It was a temporary step, but it gave Nicole some air to breathe. Still, she couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her flinch. Every car that passed outside made her clutch her belly. The fear was a weight pressing into her chest. Then came a small relief. A knock at the door the next morning. Nicole hesitated, but Chris peeked through the blinds and opened it. It was Melissa, the nurse from the HOA meeting, and behind her stood three other neighbors, Reggie, Jeremy, and an older woman named Mrs. Loretta. We're done hiding, Melissa said. We're forming a petition. You're not alone anymore. For the first time in weeks, Elijah smiled. They sat in the living room, sipping coffee over a coffee table now scratched and chipped from the break-in. The neighbors shared stories. Things they had never dared say out loud. Harassments, fines that made no sense, threats that came in phone calls from blocked numbers, unmarked envelopes with nothing but pictures of their homes inside. Karen's reach had been long. But her leash was thinning. Darren showed them how to lock their routers, encrypt their security cams, and document everything. By the end of the week, 20 residents had signed the petition. They submitted it to the City Housing Board. An independent investigator was assigned to audit the HOA. It should have felt like victory. But it didn't. Because on Sunday morning, Nicole went missing. It started like any normal day. Elijah had gone for a run while Chris prepped breakfast. Nicole stepped outside for just a minute to get some fresh air. When Elijah got back, the porch was empty. The front gate was cracked open. And Nicole's phone was lying face down on the walkway, screen shattered. Elijah's heart thundered as he raced down the street, shouting her name. Neighbors heard. Chris sprinted in the opposite direction. No answer. No sign. Nothing. Then, a sound. The doorbell rang. Chris turned, breathing hard, and yanked it open. A package sat on the front mat. No return label. Just a plain white box. Elijah approached it slowly, crouched, and carefully opened the top. Inside was a flash drive. And a note. She's safe for now. But you're going to pay. Elijah didn't wait. He plugged the drive into Darren's laptop and played the file. The video showed Nicole, tied to a chair in what looked like a garage. She wasn't hurt. But her face was streaked with tears, and her mouth was gagged. A voice played over the footage. Distorted. Chilling. You could have kept quiet. You could have followed the rules. But now you want to be a hero. Let's see how heroic you are when there's no one left to protect. Elijah gripped the edge of the desk. This ends now, he whispered. Chris nodded, eyes burning. Then let's end it. That night, Elijah put on his uniform. Not to go on duty, but to remind himself who he was. A cop. A husband. A father. And someone who wasn't going to let them win. What they didn't know was that Elijah had already traced the background noise in the video. Darren identified a faint chime, an ice cream truck jingle, that only played in one part of town. The industrial side. Warehouses. Abandoned service garages. Lots of concrete and silence. A perfect place to hide someone if you didn't want them found. But they'd made a mistake. They forgot Elijah wasn't just defending his home anymore. He was coming for them. And he wasn't coming alone. Rain pelted the windshield as Elijah's car turned off the main road onto a cracked side street littered with gravel and old pallets. The neighborhood disappeared behind them, replaced by rows of rusted fences, broken-down warehouses, and flickering streetlights. Chris sat in the passenger seat, checking the shared GPS from Darren's tablet. The signal from Nicole's smartwatch, which she didn't even know had a backup ping, had finally narrowed to a 2-block radius in this part of town. Warehouse Row, Chris muttered. Half these buildings haven't been touched in years. Elijah's jaw was tight. Then one of them's perfect for hiding something you don't want found. They drove slowly past a long row of corrugated metal buildings until Darren's voice crackled through the Bluetooth earpiece. Signals holding steady on the east side. You should see a brown door with red spray paint. You're almost on top of it. They stopped. Elijah's boots hit the pavement first, soaked instantly. He adjusted his body cam and reached under his jacket, double-checking his sidearm. He wasn't here as an officer tonight, no badge, no sirens. He was here as a husband. Chris followed, holding a steel bat they kept in the trunk. The warehouse door was barely on its hinges. The red paint read, "No entry," but the lock was snapped. Elijah pushed the door gently, letting it creak open. Inside, it was dark, save for one swinging bulb dangling in the middle of the space. The air was damp. Moldy. Footprints tracked through the dust, fresh. Elijah's voice was barely a whisper. "Nicole?" A soft rustle echoed from somewhere in the back. He moved in, fast but silent, sweeping each corner like he was clearing a room on patrol. Chris flanked the opposite side. Then he heard it. A muffled cry. Behind a stack of wooden crates near the far wall. He ran. And there she was. Nicole. Her ankles and wrists were tied, mouth gagged with duct tape, eyes wide and terrified. She sobbed when she saw him. Elijah dropped to his knees and pulled the tape off, then worked on the zip ties. "Shoo. I've got you. I've got you, baby. You're safe now." But before they could stand, a click. The unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. Not so fast. Elijah turned slowly. From the shadows stepped a man in a hoodie and black gloves. The gun in his hand wasn't shaking. He looked calm. Focused. And far too comfortable holding a weapon. "I warned you," the man said. "I told you to leave." Elijah shielded Nicole with his body. "Who sent you?" The man smiled. "Does it matter?" "You lay a hand on her," Chris growled from behind the crates, "and I'll..." The gun swung toward the voice. But that second of distraction was all Elijah needed. In a blur, he grabbed a metal pipe off the floor and launched it at the man's wrist. The gun fired, once, but the shot went wild, slamming into the ceiling. Chris rushed in from the side, tackled the guy to the ground, and knocked the gun away. Elijah pinned him down, pulled zip ties from his belt, and locked the guy's wrists behind his back. Nicole was shaking, crying, but unhurt. Outside, the sound of approaching sirens split through the storm. Darren had called back up the moment Elijah's body cam triggered the gunshot. 5 minutes later, squad cars swarmed the lot. The man in the hoodie? He wasn't from the HOA board, but he was connected. A hired hand. Paid in cash and given Nicole's schedule, her habits, even the weak spots in the fence. And guess who provided it? Karen. It didn't take long for the story to unravel. Bank transfers, email logs, anonymous tip lines. They all pointed back to her. But she still wasn't going down quietly. The next day, as Nicole recovered at home and Elijah gave a statement at the precinct, a shocking announcement hit the neighborhood app: Karen had called an emergency board meeting. Only it wasn't in the clubhouse. It was on her lawn. She stood there with a megaphone, shouting about lies, betrayal, conspiracies, and how she was being politically targeted. A few loyalists gathered, clapping weakly. But most people stayed inside. Until Melissa walked out with a folder. And Reggie. And Jeremy. And Mrs. Loretta. Each one of them handed papers to the police car parked at the curb, statements, photos, and old complaints they had once been too afraid to share. Nicole, wrapped in a blanket, watched from the porch swing. Karen saw her. And for a second, just 1 second, her face twisted into something unrecognizable, not anger, but fear. Because this wasn't just about rules anymore. It was about justice. That night, Nicole and Elijah sat quietly under the porch light. She leaned into his chest, her hand resting on her belly. It was supposed to be over. Karen had been arrested the following morning on conspiracy charges after detectives matched her bank transactions to the burner phone used during Nicole's abduction. The man in the hoodie confessed everything under pressure. He'd been paid up front. Given photos. Schedules. A map of the house. Her name. Everything. But even as the cuffs locked around her wrists and she screamed about being framed, Elijah didn't feel relief. Just a weight in his chest. Because the note still echoed in his mind. It's not over. And it wasn't. 3 days later, Nicole went into labor. It was early, a full 3 weeks before her due date. The doctor said it was likely from the stress. But the baby was healthy. The labor was long, almost 18 hours, but when Nicole finally held their baby girl in her arms, Elijah thought maybe, just maybe, it was all worth it. They named her Lila. For the first time in weeks, there was light again. But peace didn't last long. The hospital security team flagged a visitor the next morning. A man had attempted to check in at the front desk, using a fake name but Elijah's address. When asked why he was there, he said he was family. The nurse immediately contacted Elijah. By the time he arrived in the lobby, the man had disappeared. That night, Nicole's hospital room window was found cracked open, from the outside. Elijah didn't wait. He moved them to a private security ward on a different floor. Armed guards were placed at both entrances. Someone was still coming after them. Darren did some digging and uncovered a disturbing trail. Karen wasn't working alone. The HOA president, Philip Langston, the one who had conveniently gone on vacation during the investigation, had wired money to 3 different shell accounts linked to intimidation tactics around the neighborhood over the past 2 years. The letters. The slashed tires. Even the fake complaint that had almost gotten Elijah suspended. All of it. And then came the final blow. Chris was driving home from the store when he noticed a black SUV following him. It tailed him through 3 turns, 2 neighborhoods, and even into a gas station lot. When he parked and got out, the SUV pulled up behind him. The back window rolled down. And sitting there, with a calm smile, was Philip Langston. "You're stirring up dust that's been settled a long time," Philip said. "This place. Cedar Pines? It isn't just a neighborhood. It's a system. And people like you? You don't belong in it." Chris didn't flinch. "Are you finished?" Philip's smile faded. "You want to burn it all down? Go ahead. Just know, every fire costs something." Then he rolled up the window and drove off. Chris called Elijah immediately. The next morning, Elijah went public. He uploaded every video, every file, every neighborhood confession onto a public drive. He sent it to the news. to the city council, to the local radio stations. He knew going public could cost him his job, but it was bigger than that now. The story blew up. Pregnant wife targeted by HOA, cop husband fights back. The news vans parked outside the gates. Reporters interviewed neighbors, combed through board minutes, and exposed years of corruption buried under fines and bylaws. A full investigation was launched into Cedar Pines HOA finances. But then, something happened no one expected. Karen got released on bail. And 3 nights later, the house caught fire. It started in the nursery. By the time Elijah and Nicole woke up to the sound of the smoke alarm, flames had already swallowed the east side of the house. Elijah got Nicole and Lila out through the back window while Chris kicked in the nursery door, choking on smoke, grabbing blankets, anything, everything. The fire department arrived just in time to save the structure, but the damage was severe. And the message was clear. Karen wasn't done. She was out. And she wanted revenge. But what she didn't know was that this time, Elijah had left a trap. A hidden camera in the nursery, battery-powered, offline, motion-activated. And it had caught her. Clear as day. Hooded up. Gas can in hand. Lighter flicking. They arrested her at dawn, trying to flee the state. The trial didn't take long. Arson. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. Trespassing. Harassment. Destruction of property. Endangerment of a minor. She was sentenced to 28 years with no chance of parole. Philip Langston? He fled to Florida and was later indicted on federal charges for fraud and racketeering tied to 3 different HOA boards across the state. Turns out Cedar Pines wasn't the only place he'd turned into his personal kingdom. Nicole and Elijah moved away. A small house on the edge of a lake, far from the grip of HOA bylaws and watchful eyes. Nicole opened a blog called The Swing Still Sways, where she told their story piece by piece. It went viral. People began sharing their own HOA horror stories. And a movement began. HOA reform bills were introduced in 3 states within 6 months. Sometimes, change starts with fire. And sometimes, the quiet ones, the ones who don't raise their voices, are the ones who burn the whole system down. One night, months later, Elijah stood on the back porch holding Lila in his arms. The lake shimmered beneath the moonlight. Nicole rocked gently in a new porch swing. He looked down at his daughter and whispered, "No one will ever scare you into silence." Behind them, the wind picked up. And far away, in the distance, a single red envelope blew across the porch steps. No return address. Just one word handwritten on the back. Soon. From slashed tires to a baby almost born into chaos, this wasn't just HOA madness, this was warfare disguised as neighborhood rules. But in the end, justice wasn't just served, it was personal. If this story had your heart racing like it did ours, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories where truth crushes power, and share it with someone who's ever had to deal with an entitled HOA Karen. And remember, when you stand up for what's right, you might lose sleep, but you'll never lose your voice.